the shadowy corridors of history, where science, superstition, and fear once danced a tangled waltz, a man emerged whose words would echo through centuries. His name was Michel de Nostri, but the world would come to know him simply as Nostradamus. His was a life carved out in the twilight between the known and the unknowable, between rational healing and mystic revelation, between plague and prophecy. Born in December of 1503 in Saint-Rémy de Provence, a quiet town in southern France, Nostradamus came into a world gripped by chaos, war, and disease, a fertile ground for both despair and divine speculation. Michel was born into a Jewish family that had converted to Catholicism, likely under the growing pressures of the Inquisition. His grandfather, a learned man, reportedly introduced him to classical education and the mysterious science of the stars, astrology. In those days, astrology was not seen as an oddity or a fringe belief, but was deeply entwined with medicine, philosophy, and theology. The alignment of the stars could dictate harvests, influence wars, and determine the fate of kings. For young Michel, this merging of cosmic rhythms and earthly events would become a lifelong obsession. As a young man, Michel studied medicine at the University of Montpellier, one of the most prestigious institutions of its time. However, even here, he was an anomaly. He questioned traditional methods, embraced hygiene long before it was understood, and often clashed with faculty. There is even a record of his temporary expulsion for having worked as an apothecary, considered a manual trade beneath a scholar. But he returned, finished his studies, and began a career that would soon lead him face to face with the Black Death. The plague in all its unrelenting terror swept through Europe in waves, and Nostradamus met it head-on. Unlike many of his contemporaries who relied on leeches and superstition, he applied innovative methods: clean water, fresh air, removal of infected corpses, simple yet radical steps that often spared entire villages. It was during these dark days, watching families torn apart, communities erased, and hope itself collapse, that Nostradamus's fascination with destiny deepened. He believed that history was not just a sequence of events, but a living thing with cycles and patterns that, if observed carefully enough, could be foretold. And yet, despite his medical contributions, tragedy struck. His first wife and 2 children died, most likely from the plague. Grief transformed him. He wandered through Italy, Greece, and perhaps even the Ottoman Empire. He studied ancient texts, absorbed mystical traditions, and began laying the groundwork for what would become his most infamous legacy: his prophecies. By the time he returned to France and remarried, he had begun writing what he called presages, early versions of the poetic verses that would later populate his seminal work Les Prophéties. First published in 1555, the book consisted of 4-line poems or quatrains, organized into groups called centuries. Each century contained 100 quatrains, though not all were completed. Written in a cryptic mix of Latin, Greek, Occitan, and French, the verses were deliberately obscure, often filled with symbolism, metaphor, and ambiguous imagery. Nostradamus claimed this obfuscation was necessary to protect himself from religious persecution, as prophecy was a dangerous game in the age of the Inquisition. But ambiguity was also a tool. It allowed readers, then and now, to interpret his words in countless ways, a kind of poetic inkblot test that mirrored the anxieties and desires of those who read it. Some saw hope, others doom. For Nostradamus, this obscurity may have been more than a shield. It was a mirror, reflecting back the hidden fears of every generation that picked up his book. He wasn't the first prophet, nor the last, but what set him apart was timing and method. At a moment when Europe teetered on the edge of the Renaissance and the Reformation, when old orders were crumbling and new ideologies were clashing, Nostradamus offered something more seductive than truth. He offered mystery. He didn't name exact dates or locations. He didn't dictate a singular path. Instead, he gave the world a code, a riddle that could be interpreted and reinterpreted as history unfolded. This was part of his genius. His prophecies weren't chained to the moment they were written. They were timeless, adaptable, surviving the centuries not by clarity, but by their lack of it. And people listened. Even in his lifetime, he gained fame. Catherine de' Medici, Queen of France and one of the most powerful women in Europe, invited him to court. She was reportedly fascinated and terrified by his predictions, particularly one that seemed to foresee the death of her husband, King Henry II. When Henry died in a jousting accident, a splinter of a lance piercing his eye, as Nostradamus had eerily described, the public was electrified. It didn't matter that the quatrain could be read a dozen different ways. In that moment, the prophecy was seen as fulfilled. From then on, Nostradamus was more than a man. He was a seer, a mystic, a figure whose gaze could pierce the veil of time. And yet, he remained humble in tone, claiming he did not predict with certainty, but rather glimpsed possible outcomes shaped by divine insight and astronomical calculations. His followers saw him as a prophet. His critics called him a charlatan, but none could deny that his words had power. He died in 1566, reportedly after writing a final note that eerily predicted his own death. According to legend, he told his secretary, "You will not find me alive at sunrise." By morning he was gone. Whether or not the story is true, it fit the myth so perfectly that it was embraced without question. In the centuries that followed, les Prophecies never left public consciousness. During times of crisis, wars, revolutions, plagues, economic collapses, people returned to his verses, searching for guidance, validation, or simply an explanation for the inexplicable. And each time, the quatrains yielded new meanings, as though Nostradamus had somehow known the future would always need him. But who was he, really? A gifted poet with a sharp eye for human nature, a traumatized doctor seeking order in chaos, a man of science, seduced by the stars, or perhaps all of these and more. What is certain is that Nostradamus created something enduring not because he solved the mystery of the future, but because he reminded us how much we long to solve it ourselves. His story is not just about prophecy, but about perception, the fragile, often irrational ways in which humans confront uncertainty. In his cryptic lines, we see our fears reflected back at us. Fears of war, of death, of change, of insignificance. And perhaps that's why, even in the modern world of satellites and algorithms, his name still holds weight, because deep down beneath all our reason and progress, we are still creatures who stare at the sky and wonder what tomorrow will bring. In the centuries since Michel de Nostradamus penned his enigmatic quatrains, few works of literature, mystical or otherwise, have inspired such obsessive scrutiny. Across generations and continents, people have combed through his verses, decoding, reinterpreting, and sometimes reshaping them to match the headlines of their time. In every war, every tragedy, every rise and fall of a leader, the same question returns: did Nostradamus see this coming? His most famous book, Les Prophecies, has never gone out of print. It has been translated into dozens of languages, quoted in newspapers, dissected in documentaries, and adapted into everything from comic books to conspiracy theories. Yet the core of its allure lies in its ambiguity. Each quatrain, just 4 lines long, seems to float outside of time, unanchored to specific dates or places, which has allowed interpreters extraordinary freedom. In this murky space between metaphor and meaning, imagination takes over. One of the most widely cited quatrains is believed by some to predict the rise of Adolf Hitler. It reads, "From the depths of the west of Europe, a young child will be born of poor people. He who by his tongue will seduce a great troop. His fame will increase towards the realm of the East." To the modern reader, especially one living in the aftermath of World War II, the parallels seem striking. Hitler was born in Western Europe to a modest family, known for his powerful oratory, and infamous for alliances with Eastern powers like Japan. but the name Hitler never appears in Nostradamus's original text. What we find instead is the word Hister, which some believe is a coded reference to Hitler, while others point out that Hister was the ancient Latin name for the lower Danube River. Is it prophecy or coincidence? Interpretation or projection? Another often cited quatrain appears to reference the Great Fire of London in 1666, over a century after Nostradamus' death. The verse says the blood of the just will be demanded of London, burnt by fire in the year 66. The ancient lady will fall from her high place, and many of the same sect will be killed. It is true that in 1666, a devastating fire tore through London, destroying much of the city. That much is fact, but the connection to Nostradamus becomes persuasive only when one reads the verse retroactively. The reference to the year 66 inches certainly raises eyebrows, but nothing in the text directly names London's fire. Instead, it uses allegorical language, the ancient lady, blood of the just, which allows for expansive interpretation. The events of 1666 happened, but did he see them before they occurred? Or are we simply making his words fit the moment? In more recent history, perhaps no event has been more widely attributed to Nostradamus than the attacks of September 11, 2001. After that day, an avalanche of supposed quatrains circulated online, many of them fabricated or loosely based on real texts. One of the fake quatrains, which went viral, read, "In the city of God there will be a great thunder, two brothers torn apart by chaos. While the fortress endures, the great leader will succumb. The third big war will begin when the big city is burning." This was not written by Nostradamus. It was a modern invention, crafted to appear prophetic, and yet millions believed it. The image of two brothers torn apart by chaos was taken as a metaphor for the Twin Towers. The big city burning resonated with the smoke-filled skies over Manhattan. The power of suggestion, amplified by fear, did the rest. Even legitimate quatrains have been bent to fit the narrative. One that many point to says, "Earth-shaking fire from the center of the earth will cause tremors around the new city. Two great rocks will war for a long time. Then Earthusa will redden a new river." The phrase "new city" has often been linked to New York. Two great rocks are taken to mean the World Trade Center towers. But again, these interpretations are constructed after the fact. There is no mention of airplanes, terrorists, or specific dates, and still the allure is undeniable. Why? Part of the answer lies in human psychology. In moments of collective trauma, people seek order amid chaos. Nostradamus offers a strange kind of comfort. If someone saw this coming, perhaps it was meant to be. Perhaps there is a design to our suffering. A reason that extends beyond politics or chance. It is easier in a way to believe that the pain was prophesied than to accept its randomness. His quatrains have also been linked, sometimes tenuously, sometimes eerily, to natural disasters. Earthquakes, tsunamis, eclipses, and pandemics all find their place in his verses, thanks in large part to the universal language he employed. Fire, blood, floods, stars, and darkness, all recurring symbols that transcend geography and era. This flexibility gives his prophecies a chameleon-like quality, always adapting, always relevant. But not all interpretations are post-event. Some enthusiasts attempt to forecast future events using his quatrains. They construct timelines, connect quatrains with astronomical alignments, and claim to foresee the next global conflict, political upheaval, or technological revolution. These efforts often involve complex numerology and linguistic decoding. One theory posits that he predicted a third world war beginning in the Middle East. Another claims he foresaw artificial intelligence overtaking humanity. The prophecies remain open-ended, inviting a near-infinite range of possibilities. Interestingly, even during his own time, critics accused him of vagueness. Some contemporaries claimed he used anagrams, mythological references, and purposely obscure syntax to shield himself from accountability. If a prophecy failed, it could simply be reinterpreted. If it appeared to come true, it elevated his reputation. It was in their eyes a clever literary trick. And yet, his defenders argue that this complexity is not a flaw but a mark of deeper wisdom. Nostradamus never claimed to be a prophet in the religious sense. He believed he was receiving visions, perhaps dreams, influenced by astrology, history, and divine inspiration. He did not pretend to offer absolute certainty. Rather, he offered possibility, a glimpse, a whisper, a shadow on the wall. That, they say, is what separates him from frauds and fortune tellers. There is also a linguistic dimension that adds to the mystery. Nostradamus wrote in 16th century French, laced with Latin, Greek, Hebrew, and even Occitan. Over time, many translations have introduced bias, whether intentionally or not. Words can take on different meanings, contexts shift, a single mistranslation can dramatically alter the meaning of a verse.